Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to this post covering finance and property news Monday evening, and Edwin is back. Hi Edwin, how are you going?
I'm doing very well, Martin. I'm doing very well, and it's the beginning of the silly season. So let's see how it all pans out towards the end of the year. I mean, is it going to get madder than what it already is? Crazier? What other bill is going to get kicked out, and what other bills are they going to try and sneak in before the end of the year? Is the other question.
Well, it's certainly a very, very big question. Did you see this, that the Greens have actually now capitulated on the help to buy and build to rent bills after the long stalemate? So they couldn't let the Albanese government not pass the housing related stuff. And I also note, of course, that the clampdown on student numbers is also now not going to be debated because basically the political bun fight started there. So you have to say that it seems to me that all of the bills that are actually trying to support the property sector seem to be going through, and all the ones that aren't don't seem to be going through. So I find that very fascinating. Of course, just as while we're talking about what the Parliament's been doing, we should just say, hey, the Misinformation Bill is dead again for now. So that got canned at the weekend. But of course, we've still got the other bill, which is the under 16 social media ban, potentially for people under 16. And interestingly, I made a submission. You know, they gave, believe it or not, Edwin, they had an inquiry this morning. They gave 24 hours last week for people to make a submission to the Online Safety Amendment Social Media Minimum Age Bill of 2024. And they said the committee will consider carefully all the matters you raise. I put a submission in. So I find it fascinating that in the very brief hearing that was just over 4 hours today, pretty much everyone was saying, well, we're not see what's the point. But anyway, Albanese actually gave his support directly today, and it's going to come back at 8 p.m. and will be passed in the lower house. So I don't know. Is this democracy or something else?
I don't know, Martin. All I know is, like I said, we're into the home stretch of the silly season. So let's see what happens. I mean, it's all playing out, and it'll continue to play out for a while now as to controls and more controls, controlling the prices of housing. The rental side of things seem to be out of their control at the moment. Who knows what's going to happen later on? But as you said, the Greens are really sort of hit at the dead end on that one. But look, I think they're going to just be reintroduced. Many of these proposals, many of these bills, many of the whatever you want to call them, many policies, they'll get get hammered on the way in the first time, but then they bring them in under a different in stealth under a different name and they're disguised as something else. And this is where in a way where social media and rants like tonight and other posts that you put out throughout the week and now to become more informative than what the mainstream media will tell the people because the big question moving forward is what's real and what's not. I mean, there's a push. I'm still putting that story together to share with our viewers with regard to the big push from the real estate industry to further inhibit or further cover sale price points, and that's really fascinating and how the industry is pushing not to have price disclosure and that level of transparency, which really flies in the face of as you said of the nation that we once knew.
Absolutely. Well, interestingly, I do think there are some significant variations across the country here. And I've had quite a few one-to-one conversations in the last couple of weeks. And it's interesting how property investing is back on the agenda. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to run a live show talking specifically about property investing. Is it a nightmare or a great deal? And actually, I'm going to argue in the show tomorrow, Edwin, that both is true. So in some cases, we've got people rushing for the exits with property that is really not performing. We've got other people trying to get into the property investment sector, thinking that property is a great investment. And both can be true at the same time, depending on what you invest in and where you invest. So hopefully people will want to join that live show tomorrow and explore that in some detail. I'm going to share some data with regards to the gross and net investment yields, and also look at some of the other mapping that I've done, and relay some of the discussions that I've had with people. Because what I find interesting is that when people are thinking about property investing, the calculations that they do in their heads are way off what the truth is, both in terms of the prospective value of the property that they're looking at and also the cash flow relating to it. So it should be an interesting discussion, but it's all over the place.
Look, it is, and this is where people have really got to get a handle as to, as you said, what it is that they're looking for, what outcomes that they want to achieve, short term, medium term, and long term, because not everything that they, again, yeah, some of the posts when I watch the videos that you put on YouTube and that, there are forever, YouTube, ads that come up on there are all about refinancing, financing, and about buying this and buying that, and how putting with as little as $50,000 or self-managed super funds. I mean, it's all about pushing the property market, the property purchase, but people have got to be really, really careful as to where they go, how they get there, and what it is that they're really being offered. The first and foremost that people have got to understand is when they're buying something that's off the plan and it's brand new and hunky dory, and it's just being slapped up. Well, that's the first concern, is that it's just being slapped up, and you don't know you won't know how that building or development is going to fare in the future, unless you avail yourself and you educate yourself with previous developments that developer has and builder has built throughout the region where you're buying. Secondly, you've got to be really, really careful, if it's something that's being pushed by your financial planner, your mortgage broker, or your accountant. Well, you know that they're getting a sweet deal on up front, and this is what I've been talking about for 25 years, and this is why I broke ranks with the area in New South Wales, is because they wouldn't protect the industry. That's a long battle that I've been having with that side of things, because and a lot of them are moonlighting without real estate licenses, but yet they get upwards of 5%, up to 5% and more, in some cases 8%. For spruiking off the plan properties. So who wears that cost? You do. You as the consumer do. And people have got to understand these things, but they don't. They'll just go in there because, again, they've watched a 30-second infomercial on YouTube or any other social media platform, and hey, they get convinced to buy, look, I'm not against buying property with your self-managed super fund. What I am against is when you're borrowing with your self-managed super fund more than a 50% LVR, or even up to a 50% LVR. I think it's crazy anyway. If you're going to buy property with your self-managed super fund, make sure you have enough to, worst case scenario, you get a just a 20 or 30% LVR, or preferably you buy the property outright. But each to their own. I'm not a financial planner. We're not financial planning. We're not financial planners, not giving financial advice. But we do know, and we have uncovered over the years the many ways which the consumers, being buyers of property, get hoodwinked into rotten deals, and then they end up being put back on the market at a lesser price than what they bought into. And again, it goes back to the area, goes back to all those things that we've discussed, Martin. So yeah, look, I'll definitely Yeah, I'll be watching, I'll be listening, and I'll also be participating if I'm allowed to ask questions on your show tomorrow.
We'll look forward to that, Edwin, as always. Very interesting to have your participation. Just in terms of some of the data, this was actually an interesting article that showed that essential workers on average wages can't afford to live in Sydney, specifically closer in. So, the darker the colours, the more worse it gets. And basically, essential frontline workers are now locked out of much of Greater Sydney, with mortgage repayments consuming between 50 to 100% of the average $120,000 pay packet. So, I mean, I'm seeing that in my data. So that's one of those sort of stress related issues that I'm seeing. People are just struggling. By the way, it's interesting to look at some of those same areas where, of course, mortgage stress is very high for those who've already bought in. And the other interesting article that I saw, which was talking about some of this, was to say, well, units as big as house could be a bargain. They have the same floor sizes, are in the same suburbs, but can be hugely cheaper. Now, again, what's interesting about that one, Edwin, is of course that they don't mention the strata fees, right? Don't mention the additional costs. And that's one of the things that I'm seeing with some of the people that I'm speaking with. They're not taking a full account of all the cash flows relating to property. So, for example, you have to pay stamp duty on the way in. Well, they don't necessarily put that into their calculation when they think about what the actual, valuation should be and what the cash flow would be. They don't necessarily take account of strata fees and repairs and some of the other things too. So my argument is people are making very bad decisions at the moment because they're not doing it on a level playing field. And what I'm thinking at the moment is people are being deceived a little bit. People are talking up the market in many areas. I think Sydney is more robust. And we were saying just before we came on air, in a way, there seem to be more levels of support in and around Sydney. Maybe there are more politicians with houses for investment purposes in the Greater Sydney region. Maybe that's the reason. But the fact of the matter is that when I actually peel back the onion and talk to people about what they've actually been doing and how they're thinking about it, I'm amazed at what they miss in terms of some of the things they should be thinking about.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of things that unfortunately people miss, and a lot of people miss doing when they're buying into apartment complexes, because that seems to be the majority, and that's obviously the beginning of the conversation that we're having at the moment. And that is they fail to do common area building inspections. All they look at is the actual space that they're walking into at the open house inspection, which is the apartment that they're looking at buying, and then they get mesmerized by what's being done or renovated or whatever. In a lot of cases, as you say, they overlook the strata, they overlook the common areas, they overlook all these things, and this is where a lot more goes wrong with a lot of these areas, and not understanding how things function in the future. A lot of people don't seem to understand the caps on a lot of the apartment complexes in terms of the rental caps as well. In some of the suburbs. But going back further to the story about getting out of Sydney and essential workers. Look, there's two sides to that story as well, Martin. And the other side, I know I'm not going to be very popular for a little bit, but a lot of the people that I've spoken to that are essential workers, once I get to sit down with them and I have assisted them in buying properties, and I'm currently assisting one party that's an essential worker looking at property, and we've been able to look a little bit further afield than they were looking at, and looking at the price points and looking at the type of apartment that they were looking at as to what we've made what I believe to be a great offer on, and at this point it looks to be 98% approved, and all because they're able to look a little bit further afield, and in my view, they've ended up they're going to end up in a better apartment complex, a better location, but guess what? He's going to have to walk. He's going to have to walk 5 extra minutes to the nearest train station. Poor little bunny's going to have to sacrifice himself. Five extra. I know the leather, the soles of the shoes that the young generation are wearing at the moment. They wear out very quickly. But they don't make them like they used to back in the day when you and I were in our 20s, Martin. But look, yeah, maybe that's a price you have to pay. But look, yeah, the space is better. The ambience is better. Yeah, it's surrounded by a lot more owner occupiers than tenants. And yeah, and these are the hard choices, the choices that people have to make. Martin, I know there are other people on our books that are looking at buying into apartments, and yeah, they're looking closer to town. They're looking, and price points escalate because there's just not enough of them around. So, look, as I said, there's two sides to that story. I refrain from commenting on that story when Tarek put it up on his feed because I knew I was going to get crucified because I sit my thoughts are somewhat a little bit different than the voice that's out there forever complaining as to what they can't do and what they can't do. And by the way, it's a single individual. This purchaser that I'm talking about, I won't identify him, but is a single individual. Single income is not even on 120. He's on a lot less than that. And it's taken him 18 months to put his 10% deposit together working extra, doing extra jobs and doing a bit extra on weekends when he can. But the fortunate thing was that he was compliant with looking a little bit further afield. So it's not so much that yeah that they can't. It's that I think a lot of it's also that they won't. If you know what I'm saying, like it's not that they can't, but it's that they won't. And look, I won't say much more than that because I probably already am in trouble with some of our viewers. But that's stark reality of what we have in the city market because the city market is very, very insulated. It is very, very insulated, as we were talking earlier before the show. It's insulated from the north, from the south, from the east, from the west, up, down, and at the end of the day, Sydney uh, the migration pathway into the rest of Australia, and it is in a way the go-to place for the rest of the world. And as I said, policies won't necessarily go away; they'll just change the name. No different to what we've been talking about the immigration policies. We won't really see numbers go down. Well, what we will see is a change of names to some of the visas and change of numbers to some of the visas, and they'll just come in stealth in a different means and different ways, because we've got to insulate the Sydney property market. That is the underlying mantra that the politicians have, and we look at we look at the Sydney market with those. We don't look at it with rose-colored glasses. We have to look at it with reality, and that's the reality. And our clients, my family, our friends, make decisions based on the hard facts that are before us. Yeah, Melbourne's a different market. Brisbane will going to be a different market. Other cities are different markets, but our backyard at the moment is Sydney.
Yeah, well, I think that's really important. And I'd also make the point that not all areas of Sydney are behaving the same. So there was this one that came in. North Sydney council rates could double to fund the pool. That's a serious question, right? What happens when a government project goes over budget? Oh, never been known, right? It's worth actually looking at the rates in different parts of Sydney as well as part of the analysis that you might do, because what I believe needs to happen is that people need to take the blinkers off and look at all of the information, positive and negative. You'll never have a 100% view to be able to make the perfect decision, but you should actually get more information to make a better decision than many people do. And I think that means that people will make fewer bad decisions and better good decisions. But I do agree with you that Sydney is definitely interesting. And I'd also make the point that, of course, you've got to take a slightly broader view here with regard to some of the other things that are going on. So one of the really interesting things that have got picked up, you may have seen the ABC, I think on Insiders a couple of weeks ago, showed the living standards degrading across Australia. And actually, this was reported over the weekend again. Plunging living standards hit households harder than recessions. And the living standards are coming out and coming down to a shuddering halt. That's reheated news, but managed to get back on the front page pretty much again. So it does tell you that there is a lot of pressure on a lot of households at the moment with regard to what's going on. One of the reasons, of course, is if you look at the disposable income to debt, we know Australia holds the prize. Maybe no surprises there. Canada's up there, but if you look at the US, the housing debt to disposable income is way off in the US compared with Australia. So we are highly indebted, and that highly indebted situation is putting a lot of pressure on people. I made a show, I don't know whether you saw it, called Homeless, and I really focused in here on renters and how they're actually being punished. Actually, Perth is worse than Sydney for many renters. That was based on the rental affordability index data that came out last week. So if people want more information on that, go check it out. It's really interesting analysis. But more broadly, I want to just share this one because this was actually one that came in that showed. Now, this is based on this sort of global metric of how broadly based the Australian economy is. And it's an international metric. And you can see here at the top, Japan is first. And you can see here that Australia is down 102, in the same ballpark as Ethiopia. Whereas New Zealand, Canada, US, Germany, UK, much, much higher. So we have a much, much narrower based economy. And that's because, of course, it's resources and housing, basically, are the two things that are driving the Australian economy. And the other chart there on the left is just showing the Australian drift down. So if you go back to the year 2000, we were around 63, and now we're down to 102. So more broadly, we have a real issue in Australia with regard to the economic fundamentals. And we're becoming more and more concentrated on a smaller and smaller economic base. And that smaller economic base, of course, is resources and housing. Well, given the fact that resources is probably under pressure because of what China's doing, and maybe with the trade pressures, particularly with Trump. So housing becomes a bigger and bigger part of the economic jigsaw puzzle to try and keep the Australian economy afloat. And I think that explains a lot of the political and also some of the economic factors that we're seeing and some of the dynamics that actually are playing out.
And this is where both sides of the equation, the left and the right, have lost their way, and they've lost their way because they've lost their way, and they're meant to serve. Both parties are meant to serve the people, but unfortunately, they just seem to be serving those that have, and those that have over the last 5 years have gotten richer, and those that have not have become poorer. And the ones in between are being torn, put in that shredder, and they're just being, it's really a torture chamber for many, as you point out in there with regard to household debt, with how they're trying to sustain a sanity within the household. And you can see it all playing out in outside of the property arena. You see it all playing out in with society, with what's going on, the rise in crime, the rise in welfare recipients, the rise in the homeless, the rise in those that are single parents, and children going without, children going with one meal a day if so. And this is where you've got how can I put it? You've got but as I said, both the left and the right have really lost their way. Rather than looking after the majority, the working class, the middle class, they're really gone to look after, because I guess politicians are only human, right? And I guess they've got to aspire to have their pot of gold as well at the end of their tenure and partake. Is it any wonder that the public sector has, I think, what is it? Is it 37 or 42%, make up 42% or something of the working population of Australia are in the public sector? I mean, that's phenomenal. And the rest of the population support that, by way of paying, taxes and imposts and everything else. We don't have a manufacturing, you know, uh, what was it, an arm that we could say we're exporting X, Y, and Z. What we do have is very elitist politicians that tell us otherwise what we can't do, and therefore many small businesses' hands are tied, and therefore the productivity side of things, there is just no productivity, because then we got to hang our hat on the property prices, and also the money that the immigration brings, and with it, obviously, the open gateways for foreign investors, in the many loopholes that they find in order to buy investment properties across Australia. I mean, not to mention commercial and industrial and also farmlands, and the rights to many of our resources such as water. I mean, this is the whole upside down pyramid of where we are, and at the top or at the bottom, or the class that are being supported, is the political class that's being basically being protected by the elite. So this is where we are, Mark. Now, that's the unfortunate thing, but we got to look at it for what it is. We can't change those things. You and I can't change it. Most of our viewers can't change it. I mean, we can press. I know, old mate, from Melbourne, Barwick, he certainly has a go, and so does Uppercut Adams. But at the end of the day, we're just a voice, one voice that's trying to push against a massive tidal wave, and that tidal wave is foreign investment, into our shores. And regardless of what the policies that come up, here we are. This is where we are. And whilst we've got those undercurrents that are not in favour of construction, whilst we've got the undercurrents that are not in favour of, really building more, and those undercurrents of red tape through local LGAs, where even the states are having to fight them in order to get things done. We've got, in a way, supply to an extent is limited, and as you said earlier on, whilst this is happening, and as that the numbers rise, or there's a bit of a hiccup, a further hiccup with the property market, property arena, and there's more of a downward trend, or we go from a plateau to a slightly downward trend. It's all systems go for the politicians to press the banking, the financial sector, the institutions, to cushion any blow, and if anything, to keep on pumping it up. And this is where we are. Unfortunately, this is where we are. But many markets will react and act differently all over Australia, and in each and every capital city.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will just mention here, of course, we have the interesting situation where the Future Fund, the savings pool that was actually created some years ago to fund the public sector superannuation burden, is now going to be directed by by the politicians to invest more in housing and other things. And there's a big stoush there about how independent is the future fund and should it be directed, etc., etc. So I have to say that the more I look at this, the more concerned I become at the sort of the interventionist approach that politicians have. But the fallout is quite broad, and this was actually came up showing that cash-strapped Australians are ditching lattes and breakfast out, with cafes around the country bearing the brunt of the belt tightening. New research predicts 1 in 10 will shut its doors for good next year. And that's consistent with some of my SME surveys that are suggesting that more people are struggling. One of the things that have really changed is the ATO's attitude towards tax, and particularly tax liabilities. They were quite flexible post-COVID, but they've now clamped back down again. And so in my surveys, one of the things that I'm seeing is a lot of these small businesses whose costs are going through the roof are actually now deciding to close their doors, predominantly because they've got this huge overhang of tax that wasn't paid in previous years, which they can't afford to pay. So again, you can see here how policies over many, many years are just piling more and more pressure on small businesses. And I think, I would say that the cafes is one example, construction sector, small builders there, and some of the trade is there, another example of people who are absolutely struggling. So the pressures are building and something will give. I guess the the good news, though, if you have a different lens on things and think about, say, price of property compared with gold, well, maybe the story's a bit different.
Yeah, look, it is. Just before we go on to that, Martin, if you recall, we had the conversation, I think it was around the same time last year, where one of our insiders in one of the mid-tier accountancy practices was telling us that the ATO was going to go hell for leather on on individuals or individuals that were directors of companies that had gone bust from years ago. I mean, this is how hell bent the ATO are about chasing debt. So it's not just a matter of chasing the current debt, but it's also, so if you were a director of a company and you shut your company the doors down, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, you better come with you better have a pretty damn good excuse as to why that was done, and you better still have everything on foot, because they're coming down, and this is, they've got to change. So we did warn our viewers. I think it was late last year, early this year.
Yep.
And here we are. And more businesses, more are going to go bust. More are going to go bust. But yeah, so now we're going into. So what do we keep moving forward, Martin? What do we keep under our pillows, under our mattresses? Because obviously the currency is being devalued by the day. And is it gold, or is it Bitcoin?
Well, of course, Bitcoin is reaching for the stars, right? So I did my Saturday show, which is basically a roundup globally of all the market news, and of course, Bitcoin is tapping on 100,000 at the moment. US, which is pretty much an all-time high. But there were people saying, "Oh, it's going for $1 million this coming year." And there, of course, there are these sorts of comments like the entire financial system is going to be built around Bitcoin. This is genius, or well, is it? I'm not sure. There are a few questions around, the valuation of Bitcoin and to what extent it's, just a smoke and mirrors, and how real is it? I have to tell you that there are a lot of people who are very positive around Bitcoin, who are very strong believers that this is actually, the future. And I guess you share with me some quite interesting analysis looking specifically at the relative of gold versus home prices. So let's just explore that briefly.
Yeah, look, just okay. We'll go back to the Bitcoin one, right? That post there that I shared with you, that you just put up, and it correlates with what with the gold story that we're going to talk about. So if our followers go to my feed on X, and dig that up, this is actually a financial institution in America that's looking at funding housing projects purchasing, let's say, people that are purchasing homes. Well, they'll lend them the money to, to buy the home. They'll also give them extra money to renovate the home. But they're also a part of the loan structure. The third part is a component of, I'm not sure what percentage it is of the loan, but part of it is to actually they lend them to, they will have to put towards buying Bitcoin. So this is what put that post. Kryptonians, what say you? Is this the home property, financing revolution? So that's what that post was about, like how effective, the backing of purchasing property, and what would it do to markets? I guess I wanted to have a conversation around if that was introduced in Australia, if our government was, if our financial institutions were to take something along those lines as well, or be it a second tier or third tier lender goes that way. Is Bitcoin going to stand the test of time? Is the financial institution going to make a shitload of money along with those that borrowed it, or are they going to lose? Right. So that was the premise, not knowing how the future is going to hold. Then on the weekend, I was having a conversation with one of our avid followers and viewers of the show, and he shared this, and it was rather interesting because at the same time as I put that up on X, that feed, or the day after, I met up with a client follower of the show, and he shared some really interesting information with regards to how he's been tracking the ounces of gold over a period of time from this is a unit complex in Coogee, and he's been tracking the values of the unit complex since it was built to now, and the blue squares there, that represents the historical values of the unit complex, as it gone through through time. The dates are obviously at the bottom, and that's from a research paper that he found, and then he kept on plotting the values of these particular units in that complex to right up to almost 2024. But what he also did was he correlated that, or he overlaid that with the unit cost, or the per ounce cost of gold. And if you look at the beginning there, man, it almost marries up with the with the with the trend. If you look at the following slide, so that's ounces of gold that you would need in order to buy that particular unit, or a similar unit in that complex in the eastern suburbs. So it's rather interesting that back in because gold's gone up in value to almost $4,000 an ounce, but the value of gold, back in say the early, what's that, in the early 90s, 80s, it's almost on par. So if you were to, early 90s, even in the early 90s, you needed more ounces of gold to buy the unit at that the unit at that time. Whereas now you actually need less ounces of gold, about 250 ounces of gold in order to buy the equivalent unit currently as we stand. So I guess my question is the do the Kryptonians or is Bitcoin gonna be the same, gonna have the same function, and how is it gonna be extrapolated over years? What's it gonna do? Or do we just keep on storing ounces of gold under our mattresses?
Well, of course, somebody would argue that Bitcoin is digital gold because the supply is limited, and therefore, as the demand continues to rise, that should put a continued rocket under the price up to the right over the long term. Gold, of course, has done the same recently, and that's the gold price movement is predominantly, I think, because of one, people are worried about the financial system, but particularly if you look at big investors like, China, for example, who've been acquiring gold in other countries too, and some private investors and individuals are also acquiring gold as a sort of a safe haven. The Bitcoin story is quite interesting in comparison, of course, because what we've seen in the last little while is the arrival of more ETFs, so it's easier access for Bitcoin. Remember that every time somebody buys into an ETF, a financial system player, be it a big player or a small one, makes a cut. So that's driving more profitability back into the financial system. And I've argued for some time that Bitcoin, which was sort of outside the financial system, has been sucked into it now. So it's playing a very similar game now to a lot of other financial system elements. And in fact, you've got lots of big players making significant financial benefit for themselves by clipping the ticket on the way through. So that's something just to bear in mind when you think about that. But there is some interesting arguments to say that both of these trends are because people are trusting the normal financial system less and less. And that's because of the amount of debt around the world. I touched on the debt to income ratios in Australia. We've got government debt in many parts of the world continue to rise. And, Trump's strategy probably will be to increase debt. So that's an interesting observation. And of course, we've got Gary Gensler, who was at the SEC, very negative towards Bitcoin, resigning on the day that Trump comes in, and Trump's going to clearly put somebody in there that's going to be more positive to Bitcoin. And there's an argument in the US that the US economy should have some of its government financial investments in Bitcoin, which is an interesting thought too. So, I mean, there are so many threads here. If you're trying to make a decision, though, about buying a property, to my mind, this is a bit of a false flag because nobody quite knows how this is going to play out, right? And are you better off sitting in gold or Bitcoin versus property? That's the interesting and big question. I guess you can't live in Bitcoin and you certainly can't live in gold, but you can live in a property, right? So to my mind, a property gives you, shelter and all of those other important things.
Look, but for the same token, Martin, you can't eat Bitcoin, you can't eat gold, and you can't eat the bricks, right? So,
But you can plant something in the garden and grow veggies.
yeah, true. Just for context, going back to that analogy, this is on the current unit price in that complex is 1.1 million. So one could say that you would need let's say 10.1 Bitcoin in order to buy that unit. So it'll be interesting, moving forward, what what it does. As you said, if some believe that Bitcoin's going to go to $1 million per Bitcoin, well, shit, you be able to buy 10 apartments potentially.
Yeah, later, but not now. No, indeed. Well, I've always believed that there is benefit in having Bitcoin with your investment strategy and within your portfolio, but understanding that it might go to the moon or it might crash. Nobody quite knows. What I wouldn't do is to put all of my life savings or all my superannuation into Bitcoin on the hope that in 5 years' time, I'm going to be able to buy a property. That to me, intuitively feels extremely risky. Remember, the volatility of Bitcoin is extremely high. Volatility of gold, lower, perhaps.
And one of the observations that we're seeing currently playing out is like we said from weeks ago, and that is with the surge of the price of Bitcoin and how much money people have made on stocks since the Trump effect. We've got a lot of people that have come into all of a sudden, as I was sharing with you before the show. We've had just as much inquiry with assistance to help people to look at buying property and get involved with into the property market. Over the last call it 4 weeks, we've had just as much inquiry over the last 3 weeks than we've had over the last 3 months. And the inquiry has certainly escalated because, and this is what I alluded to weeks ago when I said this is going to be the question. This is going to be the time now where the desperate housewives that have been listening to the partners, waiting on them, and now they've made this extra bit of cash. That have been renting, that have been sitting on the sideline. Now that they've all of a sudden has got this extra bit of money, are they going to continue to hold, or are they going to jump into the property arena? And I'm just talking about purely the Sydney region because that is that is where we work. I'm not talking on an overall market. And I feel strongly that it's the desperate housewives are now tapping the partners on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, you know, are we in or are you out? Are we going to get into a property, or are you going to spend the rest of your life in the dog, in the dog kennel outside?" Because the other thing is also is from I guess from uh, you know, a numbers point of view, the question is how much more will it rise, and how much more will stocks rise as well, and how long would it take for them to rise? And as you said, you can't sleep in Bitcoin, you can't sleep in a barrel of gold, but and when people need that security, that long tenure and security of having a roof over their heads, well, is that one of the reasons why we're getting a lot more inquiry currently than what we were getting before?
Yeah, but the downside of having a roof over your head is that in a storm, the roof can be damaged. I know personally. So I have a leaky roof thanks to a great chunk of tree that decided to come down over the storms over the last 24 hours. So I'll have to get to that fixed up. But there's nothing certain in life other than death and taxes and maintenance on property. But there you go. That's just the realities of owning anything, right? So there's always things to worry about. Let me just briefly move into this next phase of conversation. So New South Wales Fair Trading releases something called Property Matters. This is their little update on what's going on. And there's a really interesting observation in this particular one, which came out in November. And it's touching on your favorite subject, Edwin, penalties for underquoting in 2024. Hey, they've issued, wait for it, 83 penalties in the whole of 2024 to date. Well, what do you think?
Look, it's I think Acme Open there, his response to my post there on X was, I mean, he sums it all up. He sums it all up. He says they should have the inspectors work on commissions. So that's the answer to make going from 83 to 100, 830. Well, if only. That's and maybe that's how a lot of government departments should work. Go on commission based only and get shit done, and you get a bonus for getting it done and making it happen. But yeah, look, this is part of our segment of make auctions great again, the MAGA movement of Australia. So it is what it is, Martin. It is what it is. Obviously, in that post, when I put that post up on X, I'm keeping a close eye on 3 listings over in the eastern suburbs where the vendors' expectations, and we know about the vendors' expectations because either one of our team members have spoken with the vendor personally, or one of our associates has spoken with the vendor personally, or we know, in 2 of the cases, we know the agents that are handling the sales of those properties personally, and so we know the inside story. And when you're talking 800 to a million apart from vendors' expectations to what's being guided, I mean, this is the unfortunate thing that goes on, and this is what needs to stop. But with a little effort that gets put forward, and not to cut New South Wales Fair Trading at the knees. Admittedly, they've only got 10 inspectors. looking after not only real estate matters but also other residential matters. They, as I said, been saying for a very long time. They're underfunded, understaffed, and most of the people, most of the support staff don't know they don't know the regulations that well. They don't know how to handle it. But he's hoping for change in the future, Martin.
Yeah, well, this is interesting. And I just want to highlight what this actually says. Underquoting offences could also involve a failure of supervision. Licensees in charge and principal licensees must put robust procedures in place to ensure compliant professional conduct by agents under their supervision. Right? Our inspectors are acting on real-time data and taking a zero tolerance approach to banning out terms in property sales ads. And agents caught engaging in underquoting face penalties, including fines, a suspension or cancelled license, and further legal action. So, words and figures differ, right? So they say this is an important issue, and they've got 83 penalties issued this year. And we know this is a rife. We've discussed this many times and the rationale behind it. So, unfortunately, you're right. They're under resourced. No wonder underquoting inspections are actually very limited, and therefore the penalties are very limited. But we should highlight again, Edwin, that there's a huge gap at the moment between the initial expectations set by agents with regard to vendors and the property, and ultimately what is advertised, and then the agent sort of tries to jam together and find a meeting point between those 2 points. And in the process, people are going to get misled. The price of the property included in some of the advertisements could well be way off key relative to what it's really worth. Whilst the vendor's got this sort of massively high price in mind, the agent's got a different price in mind, and ne'er the twain shall meet.
And that's great. And unfortunately, the victims are end up in this climate, end up being the vendors themselves.
Yep.
As I said before, I've got no sympathy for the vendors that play stupid games along with the agents, and here we are. And as the numbers continue to stay relatively high for the end of the year, but many vendors are gonna get caught with the pants down, and by the right way or the wrong way, they're going to realise that the winners in all that is not them, but the selling agents, because they walk away with a fat wallet, and the vendors stay back, licking their chops.
Yeah, well, let's look at the numbers briefly. So in Sydney on the 18th, we had 21,356 properties on the Domain Greater Sydney area. And the following week, the 25th of the 11th, 20,714. So there's an interesting little move back there. And we're actually seeing that in your chart, which shows that actually the decline in listings is consistent with last year, but we reached a slightly higher peak. But it's worth looking at the mix of property that's actually being offered and the quality of the property that's being offered. But as we come into the end of the season now, you would expect listings to ease back.
Yeah, that's correct, and they will continue to ease back because of the fact that the legal eagles and the conveyancers also take a big break, and very few are on duty, and that's just a natural seasonal trend. But the interesting thing, Martin, in all this is the Melbourne numbers. They keep on keeping on.
Well, let's look on the 18th. We had 31,191. Jump forward a week to the 25th, 31,256. So the numbers are rising. But there's an interesting divergence in terms of the different categories of property that's available, Edwin.
Yeah, look, the numbers are rising. But if we, from the last few weeks, we note that the land for sale, the blocks of land for sale have gone back by 500 to 700, but the numbers are still increasing. And so, as I said, these things just keep on keeping on. People still want to get out. They want to. Even the auction numbers are a lot higher than what they were same time last year, in the year before, and it's because people simply want to get out. They've got no option but to sell. But nobody's really picking them up because they aren't in the majority of the listings aren't in the areas where people want to necessarily have the principal place of residence, be it from demographics point of view or region and uh, yeah proximity to the CBD and so forth. But there's a lot of choice, and we'll continue to hear more about how how prices are going to keep on pulling back in many parts of the Melbourne markets. There'll be some that are still holding their ground, but again, it's your similar stories of your eastern suburbs, your inner wests, your lower north shores of Sydney, and where in the desired areas where people want to, want to hold and they hold their ground.
Yeah, and we've still got that pressure in the Melbourne market with more suburbs being earmarked for high rise development. There was more coverage in the last week of people in some of those suburbs demonstrating avidly against the fact that their own suburbs were being effectively condemned to a very different high rise future. And they feel powerless. The Victorian government seems to be imposing this without appropriate consultation. And for all the other rules and regs that have been coming in, of course, property investors in Melbourne are still looking to exit. That's one of the reasons why this conversation tomorrow on my live show will be quite interesting, because we do have a very different story in investment terms between Sydney and Melbourne. Just we look at Brisbane briefly. On the 18th, 4,364. And on the 25th, 4,286. So again, similar trends to Sydney there, coming down a little bit. And looking at the auctions, you do make the point quite significantly. There is a divergence now between what's going on in New South Wales and in Victoria. The Victorian auction stats seem to be still quite a lot higher. There is an air of desperation amongst my one-to-one conversations for those in the Melbourne area. They're watching property prices continuing to ease down. The rate of fall is increasing, and the number of poor quality properties being listed is rising, and the auctions are still stronger.
Yeah, and because that is the easy way out. And they've come, many come to that point where they'll take what they get on the day. But the numbers the numbers on market keep on rising, so they're not. It's not like we're seeing a retreat in numbers or an absorption of sales, and you have to wonder what even under private treaty those properties aren't being picked up. But this is the short-term effect when you have issues with when you got governments or going toe to toe with property investors because they want to put in some sort of socialistic mandates or the like to control rents and control those type of economies, and I'm not seeing those numbers being absorbed. What one would think in some suburbs, I know of some of our followers that DM me on the different platforms that have got investment properties in Melbourne. The prices have dropped by $100,000 to $150,000, and there's more available. And I'm talking about freestanding homes, but nobody seems to want to buy them. And you got to ask yourself, why? Considering that the rental numbers there's still a lot of rental stress, and the rental numbers haven't really gone up in order to quench that stress, those stress levels. This is what you get short term. Medium term, we'll see how it plays out. But whilst these policies are in place and the government seem to have it against the property investors, we're not going to see any change. And look, even if those areas where they want the high rise developments to developers to build, they're not going to get developers to build because they've got to unless the government's going to underwrite the projects. But I doubt it whether they're going to underwrite the projects when they're close to $500 million in debt, or $500 billion in debt, and you've got you got you've got to have pre-sales in order for the banks to lend you the money in order to build. Who's going to buy? Who are the majority? Who make up the majority of the pre-sale purchases in a high-rise development? Investors. Where do the majority of investors, or where have they come from over the last 15 years in many of our markets? Overseas. So unless you're going to widen that gate, or that door for overseas investors to park their money, make it easier for them, and incentivize them to buy overpriced, off the plan apartments in order to accommodate the rental market in the central hubs of Melbourne. You can whistle Dixie. They can get approved. They can do whatever they want. The builders aren't going to build them.
No, I agree, Edwin. It's a very interesting story. And just quickly on Perth, I've had a couple of people highlight to me, and I've just checked it out, that the listings numbers in Perth are now rising as well. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out into the new year, and whether in fact the property market in Perth has peaked and beginning to go sideways a bit. We'll see. Early days. On the rentals, just quickly, in Sydney, on the 18th, we had 13,891, jumped forward a week to 14,545. And in Melbourne, 12,707 on the 18th and 12,907 on the 25th. So in fact, the rental listings are rising slightly higher as well, which is consistent this time of year. But again, in my one-to-one conversations, the rental stress is continuing to be very strong. 76% of households in the rental sector with cash flow pressures, according to my analysis. And unfortunately, it's no easier than it was to find places that are reasonable to rent. And we're still seeing a lot of people, frankly, struggling to find anything that's reasonable, or having to compromise and living with mold and damp and other rather unfortunate stories as well. It's a really, really very sad state of affairs. And unfortunately, Edwin, I don't see this playing out any differently. You mentioned the migration. Well, as I mentioned earlier on, it appears that the idea of dialing back students is going to be lost, because that legislation will not be passed, I think, this week by the government. So that's because of the opposition now turning around and saying we're not going to support that particular approach, despite the fact that Dutton previously was actually very, very vociferous about dialing back some of the migration. So we'll see. Now, just as we come to the end of the show, you've got a tip of the week, and this is actually a really, really interesting but also very concerning observation.
Yeah, and it all plays in hand with all that we've been talking about, and what happens when you've got this. The issues that we have now that many people are facing with the household pressures and pressures that they're facing, and in some cases even those that have had businesses and now losing them, and or under pressure or under overcommitted, and they've got debt. What we're hearing from our insurance people that we deal with insurance, from insurance companies, investigators that deal with, from part of our legal eagles that deal with insurance fraud, and they have detectives on board, and conversations with them is there's a rise in high value cars being staged to basically be write-offs, staging accidents. So my tip is be careful. Just because it's a vehicle that's driving next to you, in front of you, behind you, that's of high value, doesn't mean that they're insured. Also, because you just don't know. So the only way that you can cover yourself, you can protect yourself, is make sure that your vehicle is insured. Worst case scenario, if you don't have comprehensive insurance, have at least third-party insurance. So should you be at fault, at least the third-party cover and I'm not talking about just your green slip, I'm talking about specific third-party cover that will cover the that damage of the other side or or injury of the other party, but not necessarily yours or those in your vehicle. At least have that because it's wild out there, and it's synonymous with the pressures that a lot of people are facing, Martin, where you've got because insurance policies aren't cheap, as we've been talking about for a while, in many of these discussions and many of the posts that you put up on other posts on other videos as well, talking about that the cost to run small businesses and to even have to have the extra money for to pay for insurances is just not there. And when you start talking about households that have got two, God forbid, they've got three or four cars in a household, it is very costly. Now, some of my colleagues that have got uh, you know driving age kids that still live at home. I'm gobsmacked when we talk and they tell me that Johnny has a car, Mary has a car, Lucy has a car, and then the missus has a car, and then he's got his work truck, and then of course there's the weekend car, and I mean these are some of the households that when you got those sort of uh, the amount of cars. Can you imagine the bill on a year by year basis of insurance, rego, and maintenance? It's horrendous. So guess what? There's a. I'd go as far as to say that is it 30%? Is it 40%? Is it 50% of vehicles that are on the road at the moment aren't insured? So you really got to be careful. You got to make sure that yours is and that you are protected. And especially if you're commuting a lot further to go to work. I myself personally, I do close to 1,000 kilometers a week. So I've got to make sure that everything is hunky dory, not only properly insured, but also the truck's well maintained, and I'm going to get from point A to point B and not break down. I've had a couple of breakdowns that have been very, very costly, but once that gets sorted out, and it's not a good place to be in when you've got no transport.
No, I agree. And I do see that in my surveys. A lot of people who have multiple vehicles, they are dialing back on their insurance cover, moving perhaps to the cheaper cover or paying the first few $1,000s and what have you, which of course puts more pressure. The other point, of course, is people driving a long way. If you're looking out in the western suburbs coming into Sydney, you got tolls everywhere as well. So one of the other big costs that people don't take into account when they're thinking of moving further out are the tolls that you can't really avoid. And those tolls add up dramatically. So one of the things I see in some of my analysis is that the costs of travel, and that includes obviously the cost of the fuel, but also the costs of the maintenance and also the insurance and also the tolls. That is a really big pressure on households, and it's one that they can't really avoid. So if you do go further out, think about those other issues as well. And just as I come to the end of the show, Edwin, I just wanted to share this with you. You might be interested now. The Australia Post is looking to increase the price of a letter from July next year from $1.50 to $1.70. That is a proposal that has been sent to the ACCC. And the ACCC said that it would be seeking feedback from the public, and it would also look at the recovery of efficient costs, including reasonable rates of return, etc., etc. I have to tell you that this is another example of stupidity on steroids. Okay, I agree that the volume of posts is falling, but Australia Posts, of course, the answer is they should become a bank, and then they would actually provide significant services. The fact of the matter is that if they are fixated on just doing the postal bit and not thinking about the leverage of their branches, then they're probably going to end up in the gutter. But there is actually an alternative model. And as I've discussed with Robbie on quite a few shows, the idea of a postal bank where effectively they can compete with the majors and provide better service through their branch network seems to me the way to go. But the leadership of the Australia Post and the government also doesn't seem very keen on that. But there may be some changes coming. So I just thought it was an interesting little observation to end the show on today. Edwin, thank you very much for your time. As always, enjoyed speaking with you. Hopefully we'll be able to chat next week. I'll probably, hopefully, get my roof fixed, or I'll have roofers on the roof at the time, because I'm not sure how big the problem is. It may not be even big. It may be big. I don't know. So watch this space, and it just shows you that life is unpredictable.
Oh, very much so. Good luck with your repairs, and hopefully you don't get flooded out, and you do have the live show tomorrow. Because a lot of people
well,
will
indeed.
be looking forward to it.
Luckily, I have a supply of buckets, so that's my strategy at the moment. We'll see you soon, Edwin. Take care. Bye bye.